welcome back to the Twisting Spiral Heart FPP project. Today we're going to get into the nitty-gritty as promised. We're going to get this heart made up. It may not be finished today, but at least by one more episode of this tutorial you will have one of these beauties. And I chose, the background is a fat quarter that I had of Stonehenge surfaces, and then the other two pieces that I have here are Benartex New Hue Basics. And I had several of these New Hue Basics and the Stonehenge surfaces, so I'm going to do all of my stars with those fabrics. And each heart will be unique, but they will all coordinate together. You can do your heart however you want, depending on how many you're making. If you're just making this one heart, then you don't have to do a lot of coordinating. Just get you two colors for your heart and a background color. I noticed that when I was constructing my first heart here, that on page 10 of the Twisting Spiral Heart instructions, you have a table here of yardage estimates. And remember, those are for 4 blocks. So if you're making 4 blocks, definitely follow those. If you're making 1 block, I was able to use 1 fat quarter for the background, and I had a fat quarter each of my 2 heart colors, but you could probably get away with a fat 1/8 if you wanted to do it that way. Either way, it doesn't take a whole lot of fabric, but make sure you have enough for your background, because that's the biggest part of it. The fat quarter that I used was almost completely used, so you have to cut a lot of little jagged pieces and overcut to get those in there. So sometimes you end up with a little waste. Well, you do end up with a little waste, so keep that in mind on your yardages there. Today I'm going to use another set of the same fabrics as I mentioned, just a pink and a red and a little bit more of a medium rather than the black that I had. I love this. I would love to get some more of that black Stonehenge surface in that color there. So to get ready, first thing you're going to have to do is get your fabric out and iron it. Starch it. If you like to use starch, I use this Quilting and Crafting Steamer Boost. So you can have your iron on steam and then put this on, and it'll kind of act like a sizing, but it doesn't leave anything behind. And it definitely doesn't leave anything behind like starch does. But if you want to starch your fabrics, you definitely can. It's not a problem. Okay, and then another thing that I ran across while I was making my block that might be helpful to you is my 3 colors that I used, the pink and the light pink and the black. I marked them on the selvage, or some area that was not going to get cut into. So on your pattern here, you have background is BKGD. So anywhere you see that, I use the black. And then you have the little dark stars, and that was my light one. So I wrote my heart color number 1 with the star. And then the little opaque looking heart is the opposite color, and that was my dark color. So I wrote on there a heart and number 2. So that way you don't get your fabrics out of order, because they are supposed to be every other. And trust me, you don't want to have to go back after you've added several pieces and trade out a piece where you put the wrong color in. Ask me how I know. So learn from me, learn from my mistakes, and don't do that. Just make sure you're picking up the right fabric. Otherwise, you're going to have to do some interesting seam ripping and then resewing, which if you're an experienced sewist, you'll be able to do it. It's not, it's not game over if you do that. It's just that you'll have to fix it. So be forewarned on that. A few other things. I want you to pick up your other download that you have, the one with the practice block. Now, some of you expressed from last week's video afterwards that you were going to do the practice block, and great. I hope you did. If you thought you needed to, this is a very simple foundation paper piecing pattern to start out with. But some reminders from this, if you want to turn to the, let's see, these pages aren't marked. Okay, listen carefully. On page 1, not the cover page, but page 1, that first paragraph under introduction, I want to point out what it says in that first paragraph. On the second line, it says, fabric pieces are sewn directly to a printed foundation pattern on its reverse side. So just remember, when the paper's facing you, what you're going to sew to, your fabric is going to be on the back side of this always. And you're always going to be sewing on the front, on the lines. You're only going to be sewing one line at a time. Don't get the idea that, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and sew all the way around for that piece. That's not the way it works. So it says fabric pieces are sewn directly to a printed foundation pattern on its reverse side away from the quilter. The printed side of the foundation pattern is face up to allow the quilter to follow the printed seam lines while sewing. So basically what I just said. And then you want to set a small stitch length. It's 1.8, I would say 1.8 for, I think that's 18 stitches an inch or something like that. However your machine guides you on that, or if you have a computerized machine, it might be 1.5 is what you want to set it to. You're going to need to leave some extra around each fabric piece that you're using. It says need to leave at least 1/4. I would go way more than that, more like 1/2. As a matter of fact, I measured the length of the shape of that particular piece and the width and added about 1.5 inches altogether, so that I really had kind of like 3/4 of an inch all the way around. But a good heavy 1/2 inch should do ya. Okay, the printed side of the paper foundation always faces up, and the fabric pieces are sewn to the reverse, which means they're not visible when sewing. They're underneath of this, and the right side is towards the table. When you turn the work over to view the fabric, the printed side of the fabric should be face up. So once you've sewn it and you turn it over on the back, your right side of your fabric should be showing always. This is working with mirror images, so when you first get started, you might mess up and you might have to unstitch. You know, maybe the first 2 or 3 you mess them all 3 up, but don't give up, because you will get it. And once you get past those initial mistakes, you'll just start flying with it. So don't get mad at yourself and throw it in a corner. You will continue on, and you will learn to like it quick. It is very much a fun project, so don't give up. The numbers in each area are go in the exact piecing order. So you'll notice on your A that you have pieces 1 through 21, and you will never go out of order when you add your pieces. You always go 1 and then 2 and 3 and 4. Now your first 2 pieces are going to be a little bit different, because you kind of have to work with your 2 pieces at the same time to get started. But after that, you will just be stitching 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Okay, let's see if there's anything else in here. Yes, it's better to be overly generous on your starting piece than under. Don't try to save fabric. I mean, don't be just stupid conservative with the fabric, but give yourself plenty. If you need a whole nother inch around, just do that. You might need a little more fabric though. It says to always hold the fabric square with the printed design away from you. Place the fabric piece on the back or the non-printed side of the pattern so that it completely covers piece number 1 with at least a 1/4 inch past all edges of that area. And then you will actually go ahead and do the same thing with piece number 2 at the same time. Your first stitch line will be 1 and 2 being stitched together. Then you go individual after that, as I mentioned before. Sorry, I'm being a little bit too wordy here, but I just want to reiterate over and over so that you have a good experience with foundation paper piecing. Okay, if you're working on a piece that's next to this border that we left, our 1/2 inch border that we left, or more, whichever you left, go ahead and run off of that a little bit. Also, you will not do any back stitching, no locking stitches. Don't worry about it. The stitch length is so small, you're not going to have things ripping out on you. And let's see. Once you get that seam down, then you're going to do a gentle finger press, or if you have a seam roller, you can use that. I used this a couple times on my first block, but honestly I just finger pressed mostly. Okay, I marked some other things on here, I think, or maybe not. Let me see. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to go over with you from that set of instructions. So I'm going to lay that aside for now. I'm going to go ahead and iron and do this on my fabrics, and I'll be right back with that. Alright, I've got you set up as best as I can here to get started. This is my Caterpillar glow board that you can make bright or not use any light at all, which kind of defeats the purpose, other than I have the cutting board aspect of it, so I'll show you that in a second. So here we have our A and B pieces. Just want you to go ahead and get your B piece out of the way. Just put it out of from where you're working, so that's not in the way, because we're not going to be using that in this video. But your A piece here is the one that we're going to get started with. So hopefully you can see that there are all kinds of shapes on here and all sorts of figures, letters, numbers, and we need to know what all of those mean. So I'm going to point all of those out to you. You have 2 symbols. You have your heart, which is your number 2 fabric, and you have a star, kind of a twisty star, which is your number 1 fabric, or your light fabric. So dark fabric, light fabric, and then you have these sections that say BKGD, which is background. And we have piece number 1 as a background piece. So it extends from down here up to another side, another side, another side, and another side, and then your edge. Okay, so we're going to want to always have a 1/4 inch at least over to this edge, over and beyond this line right here on all these pieces, because we're going to trim this down another 1/4 inch. We left a 1/2 inch on our pattern, on our paper. We left a 1/2 inch, but we're going to end up with cutting at a 1/4 inch when we're all finished with this portion. So don't be afraid to just let it hang off the edges, and at a very least keep a 1/4 inch of fabric there as you're going along all the way around. Any pieces that touch that edge, you want to make sure that you're covering this whole piece of paper, or at least by 1/4 of an inch from that line. Okay, so we have piece 1 here, and we have piece 2 here. So we're going to want to go ahead and cut our piece out for 1 and our piece out for 2 to get started. And this is the only time during the project, other than when you start constructing your side B, that you would work with 2 pieces at the same time. So as I was explaining earlier, what I like to do is kind of get the overall longest length of it. And this one happens to be 4 inches. So you're going to want to add about 5 inches to that, so that you have a good solid 1/2 inch on each end of that shape. And then try to find your widest point. And that's looking like about 2 3/8. So we want something like 3 3/8. So we need a piece that's about 3 3/8 by 5. Let's just say 3 1/2 by 5. So I'm going to take, that's a background piece, and I have marked my area here, BK, for background. Can you see that? There's that. So what I've been doing is I've been putting, now this will fit over top of the whole thing. I've just been using a portion of it because you don't really need a whole lot of room to use your rotary mat. So what did I say? 3 3/8 by 5. So you can just kind of use some markings on this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's about 5 1/2. And then we want to do like a 3 and something. That's my 3 ruler. So let's just cut. Let's just make a little cut right here. And we're going to do another cut about 3 1/2. Did I say? Okay. So let's just kind of cut that out. You don't have to be real precise with it. Just make sure you have plenty. But we've already allowed for extra, so don't worry if you cut it a little shorter than you think, because we've already added extra. And then your piece number 2 is your light of your 2 colors. In this case I'm using pink and red, and then I have this grayish for my back. So that's the ones with the star. So I marked my selvage with the star, and I'm going to try not to cut that off anytime during this process. So here's number 2. No, it isn't. It is a heart. So let's get the other one. See how mixed up you can get if you're not paying attention and you don't have things marked? So I was able to just, here it is. There's the heart and the number 2. And then this is piece number 2, which doesn't correspond to that 2 over there, and the heart. So we need a piece, and I've already forgotten what that was. Or did I measure it yet? I don't think I had. So this one's almost 4. So let's make a 5 inch by, and here's the width. That's 1 1/4. So let's do 2 1/2 by 5. So let me get that off of there. So let's just lay this on here. A little 1/2 inch right there kind of throws me off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to make a little notch where that 6 is. And then, what did I say? 2 1/2. 1, 2 1/2. So let's just go up through here. Where's my mark? There it is. No need to be precise. And I'll probably be tapping the light more than I should while I'm doing this process. Okay, so remember in our instructions it said that our fabric, and this is the right side of this fabric, will always go face down on the back, right? So you want to get that just right about, and you can guess, right about the 1/4 inch mark of your number 2 piece. And then you're going to have your number 2 piece right here. I think that's not right. So let's go ahead. Now this is the part where you got to really think, you know, how this is going to be. So this is face down now, so I'm going to need to make it here so that it will flip over. So yes, it's going to have to go here. All right. And you can just kind of imagine, you know, what if I sew this one line down, because you're not going to sew these other ones. If I just sew this one line down, what's that going to be on the back? And this is what helped me, okay? So you can see there that I don't have that correct. So let me turn the light off and look at this a little bit better. So this is my 1. This is my 1, and it needs to go down, face down. And then my 2 needs to go here. So, okay, so you have 2 sides together. You have your 2 right sides together, and you're going to lay this just beyond your number 2 spot there, like this. So here, let me show you. So you have right sides together, your red one is up and your black one is down, and then you're going to set that. We're going to be sewing on this on the front, so you have to sit it beyond it so that you catch your fabric. So you want to sit it about 1/4 inch down like this. And what you want to make sure to do is that that piece is going to cover that number 1. So there you go. Take a mental note of this part right here. You've got it turned with the print side down at first. You have your pieces already cut oversized, and then you lay your black on top of your color or your background on top of your first color there. Actually, that's the second color. And then beyond this line right here. So just go over it and make sure you're a good 1/4 inch over it. And make sure that when that folds over, that it's going to cover that entire number 1 spot, and you still have 1/4 inch here. So I think I'm going to move mine over just a tad. And then once I sew that down, that is going to give me enough. Alright, so you might want to go more like 4 inches by 5 inches on this one. Okay? Alright, so now before you flip it over, you're going to stick a pin in it all the way through the paper. Turn it back over, and you can see where your 1/4 inch is going to be. And I'm just a tiny bit short there. Let me see if I can adjust it a little to make it work out better. On top of that number 2. Okay. I'm going to pin it down here just for a second to see something. Right there on the 1/4. And that's going to make that pretty tight. Maybe we should turn it this way. Yes, that was the ticket. Okay, so it's a good exercise for you to watch me think this out. because this is how you're going to have to think. So the line between the 1 and the 2, make it lap over about 1/4 of an inch, and you can look on the back before you pin it and make sure. Pin it, turn it back over, and you can see that you have a good 1/4 of an inch right here. Now you can pull it over. You don't have to actually get down and measure or eyeball 1/4 of an inch. Most of us that have sewn a long time, we know what 1/4 of an inch looks like from a mile away. So that's kind of what I did. But you could have pulled that up, because look, there's probably plenty of extra up here. So now what we're going to do is sew this line down, and you're going to put your needle down right on that point and sew right on that line. And since we're at an edge, we're going to let it go over a little bit. No back stitching. And then we're just going to trim off down to about 1/2 inch. You may not be able to see my sewing machine, but I'll show you when I get done. And you want to go slowly with this and not, you know, make sure you get started in the right point. Use your hand wheel to get it right. And then sew. Going over the line, not back stitching. Pull this out, cut it off about down to 1/2 inch. Go back and cut your tails off so they're not getting all sewn into your project. You can take your pin out, and there you go. Okay, so normally what you would do is, if you had a bunch of extra fabric, you would fold this back. You're never going to cut your paper. Never. While you're doing this, you will be doing some rotary cutting on it, but you will not ever cut through your paper, only fabric. So wherever there's paper, you have to fold it back on that line. So here's where you use your add 1/4. And if you had a bunch of fabric sticking out here from where you had an extra big piece, you would take this ridged part right here. You can feel where the ridge is, the back side of the ruler. Slide it up onto your seam edge. Just kind of make it tight and cut with your rotary cutter. I just lucked out this time, and mine didn't have any. So that's what I get for being a little too precise there. I didn't really get to show you. So the next step is to open this seam that you just did, and there will be some open edges on it, and you're just going to iron the part that you sewed. I'm going to go back here and do that. You can't see me ironing, but I'm just ironing that seam down flat. Okay, so now you're going to go on to number 3. And your number 2, my number 2 did not quite make it. So let's take that out. I have a little bit left here that's not going to work. So I have to unsew this and pull this down. Yes, I do. So let's do that. Okay, so let's move this down here where I have 1/4 of an inch at least beyond. I keep hitting that. I don't need it even. Move that down. And then I have plenty on this side. And then on this side, I'm going to put that on there. Make sure it's going to cover everything. Okay, right there. So this is what your pieces should look like according to the sizes that we cut. It should be laying on there kind of like that. I'm about 1 inch off over here over the edge, and I'm about an inch over the edge with my black from this part of the red. So now I can turn it back over and sew on the line between 1 and 2. You go over that edge, cut it back, cut off your tails, take out your pin, and there we go. We're covering our number 1 very well. See that? Here's our 1. It's going down through here like this, and we've got plenty of fabric going over it. And then our number 2 is completely covered with the red. Okay, so that's your most difficult thing of this whole project, is getting 1 and 2 together. Now you're just going to do one at a time. So we have a number 3 with a star, so that's our light fabric. So I have that marked with a star and a number 1. So I need to cut a piece that's at least, this is measuring about 3 3/4, so let's say 5 by 2. 5 by 2. Here's a 5. I'm just going to use this little ruler right here and just cut right there. And 2 inches. That should be plenty. Okay. So now here's the right sides of our fabrics. So here's the, between the 2 and 3 is this line right here. So we want this to go right side down above the 2, but beyond the line at least a 1/4 inch. I tell you, I'm just keep hitting that. Let's see. Yeah, about like that. So if I lift this up, I've got plenty going over. I might go over just a little bit more, so I can show you how to cut that. And then your fabric has to come out to here and be over that, and it will. So now's the time to pin. And if you are afraid you're gonna bunch up these floppy pieces, put some pins all over it if you need to. It'll hold it. And so now we flip it back over. We always sew on the front side. And here's 2 and here's 3. So we're going to sew this line. Always sew between the 2 numbers you're working with. I just kind of walk those last few stitches with my needle up and down because I don't want to go beyond unless I'm on the edge. If you're not on the edge, don't go beyond. Not good. Okay. Alright. Take our pins out. And here is our 3. So what we're going to do, let's make sure that's going to cover. Yes, it's going to cover nicely. So what we want to do is grab all this extra beyond, fold your paper back. You're going to put your add a 1/4 up against your seam and cut this off. Just fabric, but don't do it on your light like I was just about to do. So here we go. It's all folded back. It doesn't hurt to check 3, 4, and 5 times, because once you cut something wrong, you might be starting over. Just slide it back down if you didn't. If you just got the 5 inch, they make these rulers in a longer length too, either 10 or 12. Okay, so there's that, and there's your 3. And you can kind of see it. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but you can see that number 3, which is this line and this line, is well covered. Don't worry about any of this extra just yet. Okay, so I can iron this one down. Okay, so now we're moving right along. 4 says that it's background. If you turn it back over, it says background. So we were wanting to use our black for that, or gray. So if you have 3 colors that are similar, like if you have 3 different shades of red or 3 different shades of pink, you're definitely going to want to mark them as background 1 and 2, or heart and star. So this one is, where's my little ruler? This one's about 4.5. So let's make it 5.5 by, that's about a half, so maybe 3/4. So 5.5 by 3/4. Let's see if we can make that work. Let's go over here. Okay, so we want to turn it down and make sure we get it 1/4 inch over this line towards the 4, but up on the 3 by at least 1/4 inch. So here we go. I just kind of look at it sometimes, and then you can turn it back over and make sure you have it. You know, your light helps you with that. I've got it a little crooked, but that doesn't really matter. But I've got a lot of extra on my dark there over it, so I just need 1/4 inch, but I'm going to leave that extra so you can see. So let's turn this back over. Let's pin it down. Doesn't matter how your pins go, just as long as you know you're not going to run over them. And then just the line between the 4 and the 3 section. No other line. Trim our tails and take our pins out. I'm going to trim our seam. So where you just sewed, fold that paper back, lay it down, put your add a seam, add a 1/4 inch up next to that stitched line that you just made, and cut off the excess. Oops, and I almost did it on my light again. And if you have some decent sized pieces, hang on to them. You might be able to use those in some pieces coming up. Now fold that back out, and we can see that our number 4 is going to be amply covered by that. So I'm going to iron that down. All right. Okay, so now we have our piece number, get this right side up for you. We've done 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're going to do 5. And he has a heart symbol, so that's my darker fabric. And I'm going to check myself. Yes, that's my darker fabric. And I need a piece that is, that's about 2 3/4. So let's say 5. Let's see. No, it's 2, almost 3. So let's do a 4 inch by 3 inch. Let's do a 4 by 3. You can always make them bigger if you're scared. Okay. So we're going to be going between, well, actually 4 and 5 meet at a point. So this is kind of an exception to the rule. We're going to be sewing between 3 and 5. So I'm glad I got this far with you so I could remember to tell you that. So we're going to do right sides together, and we're going to want to make sure our 5 is up on our Let's see, I do better doing it this way. So let's work between 3 and 5 here. Yes, and 1, because that's the background. So we're going to do the 1 and 3 one, and we want that to be like this, above the piece that we're getting ready to cover. And I'm just going to pull this down and make sure that it covers, and it does. So I'm just going to stick a pin in this one right here. And this time we're going to sew this 1 and 3 line. Now next time we will be working with 5 and 6, but then 4 will be included as well. Your easier patterns don't usually cross up like that. But this one does, so you're okay. Take our pin out, trim these tails. We're going to make sure again that's covering. Yes, it is. And then we're going to take all of that seam mess right there and fold that seam line we just did. Fold the paper away, never cutting the paper. Putting the add a quarter up next to it, cutting that away. Okay, there we go. So we're moving along. I'm going to press this down. Okay, so I think for now I'm going to let you go on this. Your next one will be a 6. So here's your 6. That's a 9. 6 is background. So measure this, add a couple of inches, measure the widest point of this, add a couple of inches, and lay that just between your 5, 3, and 4 here with your 1/4 inch above that. Actually, if you're looking at it, it's straight down. It's below this line, right sides together on this back here. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to sew on mine and get this half done, and I'll be right back with you here at the end, and I'll show you what I have. Alright, so here we are with our first half done, our A block portion of our heart. Did you have to rip anything out? I had one that I had to rip out besides the little rough beginning, but I hope you were able to follow the tutorial closely enough that you know, and be able to rewind it or whatever you needed to do to get those seam allowances to be on the correct side, and that you had plenty of fabric to cover each piece. So when we come back next week, you can go ahead and do your B side. It's not a mirror image. The actual other side of the block, I'll show you, has a little bit of a different look to it. If you look there, the heart starts in the center, and then it starts on the outer edge, and then it goes inside, and then it finishes actually open on this side. So we did side A, which is this side. So this side is just a tad bit different, but all of the principles are the same. So on this block here, next week when we come back, you will have done your B section, and I will show you how to trim it and remove the back and put your two pieces together. So if you have any questions or problems with this pattern, or something wasn't explained exactly the way you could understand it, shoot me an email or a comment, and I will try to answer those questions for you. Alright, continue on and have fun, and we'll see you on episode number 3.